The vinyl banner snapped in the afternoon wind. Family reunion, welcome home. I pulled up to the gated entrance of my childhood home and rolled down my window. A hired security guard in a crisp uniform stepped forward with a clipboard. He scanned the list once, then twice. His face tightened with discomfort. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name isn't on the approved guest list." Through the open iron gates, I could see everything. My mother, Lydia Stone, stood on the lawn in a flowing white dress, raising a champagne glass toward my brother Colin. Cousins I hadn't seen in months posed for photos under white rental tents. Dad's old grill, the one he'd spent every Sunday manning, was smoking with a massive roast. Laughter carried on the breeze. String lights twinkled even in daylight. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and called Mom. Across the yard, maybe 50 feet away, I watched her glance at her screen. Our eyes met for half a second. She smiled, declined the call, and typed something. My phone buzzed. Today is for people who were there for us. My vision tunneled. The security guard shifted uncomfortably. A neighbor walking her dog slowed down, staring at me with obvious pity. She knew. They all knew. My mom and brother had thrown a family reunion without me on my father's property. The property I was supposed to protect. My name is Kennedy Harris, and by sundown, I would decide what to do with the house they'd turned into a stage for rewriting history. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel for more interesting revenge stories. Dad kept our household running for 23 years. Frank Harris owned Harris Diner downtown, the kind of place where regulars knew their booth numbers and waitresses remembered how you took your coffee. He worked 14-hour days, came home smelling like fryer oil and coffee, and never complained. Mom, meanwhile, curated our family image. She coordinated holiday cards, hosted garden parties, and made sure everyone saw us as the perfect family. When Dad got sick, everything changed. The chemo drained him, but he still dragged himself to the diner until he physically couldn't anymore. I was 22, fresh out of college, when he sat me down in his hospital room. His lawyer, Elliot Rhodes, was there with papers spread across the bedside table. "I'm putting the house in a revocable trust," Dad explained, his voice weak but determined. "You'll be successor trustee and remainder beneficiary. Your mother can live there, but only if she follows the conditions." The conditions were simple. No new liens against the property. No exclusionary events that cut out family members. No misuse of estate funds tied to the trust. I didn't understand then why he was so specific. I nodded, signed where Elliot pointed, and kissed Dad's forehead. He died 3 weeks later. I moved to the city for work, built my career, and sent money whenever Mom called about repairs. The roof leaked last winter. I paid for it. The furnace died the year before. I covered that too. Meanwhile, Colin drifted between jobs, borrowed against anything with his name on it, and always had a scheme that was about to pay off. Now I sat in my car, watching them celebrate without me, and everything clicked into place. I parked across the street and set my phone to record. My hands were steadier now, replaced by something colder and sharper. I walked along the sidewalk, staying on public property. Laughter drifted over the fence. I caught fragments of conversation. Aunt Marla's voice rose above the others. Lydia said Kennedy's been erratic lately. Cutting her off was the healthy choice. My stomach dropped. Erratic. The word felt like a slap. A hired attendant appeared at the gate, blocking my view. He was young, maybe 20, and looked uncomfortable with his assignment. "Ma'am, I need you to move along. This is a private event." "This is my father's house," I said quietly. He glanced at his radio. "I'm just doing my job." I lifted my phone higher, making sure the camera captured everything. Mom noticed from across the lawn. She didn't flinch. Instead, she raised her champagne glass higher, posed for a photo with Colin, and laughed at something he said. The message was clear. I didn't matter. Cousin Ben appeared suddenly, jogging over from the side yard. He was Mom's sister's kid, always kind, always caught in the middle. He glanced over his shoulder and whispered fast. They told everyone you moved out of state and cut Lydia off completely. Nobody knew you were still here. He pressed something into my palm. A paper bracelet, the kind events use for access control. Staff wore these to get through the side gate. Then he was gone, melting back into the party before anyone noticed. I walked around the block to the side gate, heart pounding. The bracelet felt like a key to a door I shouldn't have to unlock. I held it up to the scanner mounted on the fence post. The light blinked red. Access denied. A caterer emerged from the gate, carrying empty trays. He was older, gray at the temples, and wore a company polo. He looked me up and down with suspicion. Ma'am, Lydia specifically said no unapproved entries. If you're not on the list, I can't let you in. I'm not trying to crash. This is my father's property. He started to turn away, but I caught sight of his clipboard. An invoice was clipped to the top, partially visible. I leaned in, squinting, and my blood went cold. Harris Family Trust was listed as the payer. They were using Dad's trust account to fund this reunion. The reunion I'd been excluded from. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo. The flash was too bright. The caterer whipped around, reaching for my phone. Delete that right now. I stepped back, clutching the phone to my chest. This is evidence of misuse. I'm the trustee. His expression shifted from annoyance to confusion, but he didn't let go. Heads were turning inside. People were starting to notice the commotion at the gate. My moment of stealth was over. Colin appeared, walking with that familiar cocky stride, a smirk already forming on his face. You had your chance to be part of this family, Colin said, his voice low and sharp. You chose your career and your own life. Don't come back now pretending you care. I held my ground, phone still clutched tight. I care about Dad's wishes. And I care about the trust he left to protect this property. Mom appeared behind him, her smile wide and bright for the crowd gathering near the gate. Cousins craned their necks. Aunts whispered. Phones came out. Mom's voice rang out, sweet and loud enough to carry. Kennedy. So nice of you to stop by, sweetheart. She stepped closer, still smiling, and leaned in so only I could hear. Her breath smelled like champagne. You're unstable. Everyone knows it. Leave now, or I'll have you removed. The security guard approached, hand on his radio. Ma'am, if you don't move your car in the next 5 minutes, we'll have it towed. I looked at my mother. The woman who used to braid my hair before school. The woman who cried at Dad's funeral and gripped my hand so hard it left marks. Now she stared at me like I was a stranger. Worse, like I was a problem to be eliminated. I turned and walked back to my car. But I didn't leave empty-handed. I had the photo of the invoice. And I had something else too. Clarity. I sat in the driver's seat, hands shaking again, and opened my email. I attached the photo of the caterer's invoice and typed a message to Elliot Rhodes, Dad's attorney. Need to meet Monday. They're using trust funds for this event. His reply came within 3 minutes. I'll clear my schedule. This is a breach. Monday morning, I sat across from Elliot in his office. The walls were lined with law books, and the air smelled like coffee and old paper. He'd aged since Dad's funeral, more gray in his beard, deeper lines around his eyes. He slid a copy of the trust document across the desk. Read section 12 again, he said. I scanned the page, Dad's conditions laid out in precise legal language. Occupancy was conditional upon reasonable use of the property. No exclusionary events that deliberately shut out family members. No debts or liens without written trustee approval. No misuse of estate funds for personal gain. They broke all of it, I whispered. Elliot nodded. The reunion fits the definition of an exclusionary event. And if they paid for it with trust funds, that's misuse. We have grounds to issue a notice of breach and demand a full accounting. He pulled out a legal pad and started drafting. His pen moved fast, confident. I felt a weight lift slightly. For the first time since Saturday, I didn't feel alone. There's something else, Elliot said, glancing up. A bank contacted me last week asking to verify the trust. They wanted confirmation that you, as trustee, had authorized a home equity line of credit. My stomach lurched. I never authorized anything. That's what I told them. They put the application on hold, but someone definitely tried. Who? Elliot's expression darkened. The application listed your name as the signer. But the signature didn't match the one we have on file. Someone had forged my signature. And I had a pretty good idea who. I met Angela Ruiz at First Midtown Bank on Tuesday afternoon. She was the loan officer who'd flagged the application. She led me to a small conference room and pulled up the documents on her computer. This is the application we received, she said, turning the screen toward me. Home equity line of credit. Collateral, the Harris residence. Amount requested, $250,000. Trust signer, Kennedy Harris. I stared at the signature. It was close, I'd give them that. But the loop on my K was wrong, and the slant was too steep. It wasn't mine. Who submitted this? I asked. Angela hesitated, then clicked to another screen. The applicant called from a phone number registered to Colin Stone. He said you'd approve it verbally, and the paperwork was just a formality. Colin. Of course it was Colin. He'd always been careless, always assumed he could charm his way out of consequences. But forging a signature? That crossed a line into actual crime. What happens now? I asked. We've already flagged it as suspected fraud. If you want to file a formal complaint, I can walk you through the process. I nodded slowly. I want to file. Angela printed a declaration for me to sign. As I wrote my real signature at the bottom, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about protecting Dad's house anymore. This was about stopping them before they destroyed everything he'd built. Angela handed me a copy. One more thing. The person who called mentioned needing the funds quickly for estate repairs. When I asked for an itemized estimate, he hung up. They weren't planning repairs. They were planning to cash out and disappear. I needed allies, and Aunt Marla was the only one I could trust. She'd been Dad's older sister, sharp and no-nonsense, and she'd always seen through Mom's performances. I drove to her house, a small ranch on the north side of town. The smell of lemon cleaner hit me when she opened the door. I was wondering when you'd show up, she said, ushering me inside. We sat at her kitchen table, the same one where Dad used to play cards with her on Friday nights. She poured 2 glasses of iced tea and slid one across to me. Your mother's been telling everyone you abandoned her after Frank died, Marla said bluntly. Said you moved away and only called when you wanted something. I pulled out my phone and showed her the bank statements. I've been sending money for repairs for 2 years. Every time something broke, I paid for it. Marla's jaw tightened. She stood, walked to a drawer, and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were photocopies. Receipts for the new roof. Checks I'd written for the furnace repair. Copies of my emails coordinating contractors. I keep records, she said. I had a feeling Lydia was lying. My throat tightened. Thank you. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, and her expression hardened. She turned the screen toward me. A message from Mom in the family group chat. If Kennedy shows up again, call security immediately. Do not engage. She's not safe to be around. I stared at the words until they blurred. Not safe. My own mother was telling the family I was dangerous. Marla reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm with you, kid. Whatever you need. I returned to the house at dusk. The party was winding down, but a few guests still lingered on the lawn. I parked at the curb, got out, and walked to the edge of the driveway. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. Mom, I called, my voice carrying across the yard. You charged the trust for this party. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Phones came out, recording. Mom stood near the grill, still smiling, but her eyes were ice. She's harassing me, Mom said loudly, playing to the crowd. This is what I've been dealing with. Colin appeared beside her, arms crossed. He muttered something I couldn't quite hear, but Aunt Marla, standing near the porch, caught it. She called out, her voice sharp. What did you just say, Colin? He glared at her. I said, once we get the loan, we can buy her out and keep the house. Silence. The kind of silence that follows a confession. Several cousins exchanged glances. Someone whispered, what loan? A younger cousin, Tyler, held up his phone. I'm live streaming this. Should I stop? No, I said. Let it run. Mom's smile finally cracked. You're going to regret this, Kennedy. I looked at her, this woman who'd spent my whole life crafting a perfect image, and I felt nothing but exhaustion. The only thing I regret is not seeing this sooner. I turned and walked back to my car. Behind me, I heard Aunt Marla's voice, loud and clear. Lydia, you owe everyone here an explanation. Elliot served the notice of breach and accounting demand the next morning. He and I sat at Mom's dining room table while she paced and Colin glowered from the doorway. The ledger was spread out in front of us, every expense highlighted in yellow. Event rentals. Floral arrangements. Catering. Security. All paid from the Harris Family Trust account. This is a clear violation of the no misuse clause, Elliot said calmly, sliding the document toward Mom. Kennedy, as trustee, is entitled to a full accounting and corrective action. Mom's hands shook as she flipped through the pages. We'll pay it back. This is just a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I leaned forward. You forged my signature on a loan application. Colin pushed off the doorframe. That's a lie. Elliot pulled out Angela's declaration from the bank. This is a sworn statement from the loan officer. The application was submitted from your phone number, Colin. Colin's face went red. She's twisting everything. This is about control, not Dad's wishes. Your father's wishes are documented in the trust, Elliot said. And they don't include exclusionary events or unauthorized debt. Mom slammed the ledger shut. Fine. We'll repay the party expenses. But we're keeping the house. Elliot and I exchanged a glance. I took a breath. After reviewing the trust and consulting with counsel, I've decided to list the property for sale. The room exploded. Colin shouted. Mom's face went white. Elliot remained calm, pulling out another document. This is Kennedy's legal right as trustee, especially following documented breaches. The court will uphold it. Mom sank into a chair, tears streaming. But they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of rage. Cousin Ben sent me a voice recording the next day. His text said, "You need to hear this." I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot and pressed play. Mom's voice came through, clear and cold. Once we get the line of credit approved, we can offer Kennedy a token settlement and keep the house. She doesn't need it. She has her career. Aunt Marla's voice, cautious. But she's the trustee. Can you do that without her consent? We'll figure it out. Colin knows a lawyer who can challenge the trust. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. They weren't just trying to keep the house. They were actively plotting to sidestep my authority. I forwarded the recording to Elliot. His response was immediate. This strengthens our case significantly. But there's a problem. They just filed an emergency complaint claiming you're financially exploiting your mother. I almost laughed. It was so absurd, so backwards. But this was their play. Paint me as the villain, claim I was abusing my power, and hope a judge would intervene. When's the hearing? I asked. Friday. Be ready. I spent the rest of the week gathering documents. Every receipt. Every email. Every bank statement. If they wanted to claim I was exploiting Mom, I'd show the court exactly who was exploiting whom. The courtroom was small, paneled in dark wood, and smelled like old books. Mom sat with her attorney, a silver-haired man named Patrick who specialized in elder law. Colin sat behind her, arms crossed, glaring at me. Elliot and I took our seats on the opposite side. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Carver, skimmed the trust document while we waited. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. This is a preliminary hearing to address allegations of financial exploitation, she said. Mr. Rhodes, you represent the trustee? Yes, Your Honor. And we have substantial evidence that the allegations are unfounded. Elliot methodically presented the invoices from the reunion, the clause in the trust prohibiting exclusionary events, and the receipts showing my payments for past repairs. He included Angela's declaration about the forged loan application and the voice recording Ben had provided. Mom's attorney tried to pivot. My client is grieving and confused. This gathering was a cultural event meant to honor her late husband. Any financial irregularities are simply miscommunication. Judge Carver flipped through the documents. This invoice clearly lists the trust as payer. That's not miscommunication. That's misuse. She looked at Colin. Mr. Stone, were you aware a loan application was filed in your sister's name without her consent? Colin shifted. That was a mistake. I thought she'd already approved it. A mistake that involved forging a signature? Silence. Judge Carver leaned back. I'm ordering temporary control to remain with Kennedy Harris as trustee. The defendant is to cease all spending from trust accounts immediately. We'll reconvene in 30 days for a full hearing. As we stood to leave, Colin leaned toward me and whispered, "You just started a war." I didn't respond. I just walked out, Elliot beside me, and felt the weight of what was coming. I went to the house the next day while Mom and Colin were out. As trustee, I had lawful access, but it still felt strange walking through the door with my own key. The house was quiet, almost eerie. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. The air was hot and thick, smelling like old cardboard and insulation. Dad's boxes were stacked neatly in the corner, labeled in his careful handwriting. I opened the one marked Important Docs. Inside were his personal files. Old tax returns. Business records from the diner. And at the bottom, a handwritten memo on yellow legal paper. Kennedy, if they corner you, sell the house. Peace before pride. Love, Dad. My vision blurred. He'd known. Even before he died, he'd known this might happen. He'd given me permission to let go. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around. Mom stood at the top of the stairs, still in her coat, keys in hand. Her face was pale. You're going through his things, she said quietly. I'm the trustee. It's my job. She stepped closer. You never forgave me for living, did you? Frank died, and you wanted me to die too. I held up the memo. He told me to sell if I had to. He knew you'd make this impossible. Mom's face crumpled. This house is all I have left of him. You had me too. But you threw that away at the reunion. She didn't respond. She just turned and walked back down the stairs, leaving me alone in the attic with Dad's words. We met in the kitchen an hour later. Mom clutched the edge of the counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I set Dad's memo on the table between us. You never forgave me for surviving, she said again, quieter this time. I forgave you, I replied. But you didn't stop taking. She looked at the memo, then at me. You can't sell this house. It's not just bricks and wood. It's our history. I pulled out a folder Elliot had prepared. Inside was a formal notice of intent to list, contingent on the results of the full hearing. I don't want to do this, I said. But you left me no choice. Mom laughed, sharp and bitter. No agent will touch this. I have friends in this town. They know what you're trying to do. They also know you misused trust funds and forged my signature. Her smile faded. She picked up the notice, scanned it, then tore it in half. Good luck, she said, walking out. I didn't follow. I just called Elliot and told him to move forward with the appraisal. If she wanted a fight, I'd give her one. But I'd do it by the book. 2 appraisers came separately over the next week. The first was a quiet woman named Sandra who measured rooms and took photos without much commentary. The second was an older man, George, who asked questions about the roof, the foundation, and the last major updates. Colin hovered during both visits, trying to charm them. We're planning a full renovation, he told Sandra. New kitchen, updated bathrooms. This place has incredible potential. Sandra nodded politely but didn't engage. George, on the other hand, made notes about deferred maintenance. Cracked tiles in the bathroom. Water stains on the ceiling. The furnace I'd paid to replace, but that still made strange noises. Both appraisers submitted their reports to Elliot. Sandra estimated the value at $1.85 million. George came in slightly higher at $1.95 million. The average was $1.9 million. Elliot called me that evening. We have the numbers. But there's something else. A developer reached out. They're interested in a cash offer. How did they even know it might be available? Word travels fast in real estate. Especially for properties in this neighborhood. I closed my eyes. The house Dad built, the house where I learned to ride a bike in the driveway, was becoming a transaction. But maybe that was the only way forward. Set up a meeting, I said. Mom convened what she called a family meeting 2 days later. She didn't invite me. But Aunt Marla was there, and she recorded the whole thing on her phone. Mom stood at the head of the table in the dining room, Colin beside her. About 15 relatives sat around, some looking confused, others visibly uncomfortable. I've called you all here because we need to talk about Kennedy, Mom began. She's trying to sell the house out from under me. I know times are tough, but if we pool our resources, we can buy her out and keep the home in the family. Someone asked, how much are we talking? A few thousand each. Maybe 10 or 15, depending on how many contribute. We can do this if we work together. Aunt Marla spoke up. Lydia, what about the forged loan application? The room went silent. Mom's smile tightened. That was an administrative confusion. Colin thought Kennedy had already signed off. That's not what the bank said. Mom's face flushed. Marla, you're not helping. A cousin, Stephanie, raised her hand tentatively. If Kennedy is the trustee, can we even vote her out? Mom's smile returned, confident. There are ways. My attorney says we have options. But the room didn't look convinced. Aunt Marla sent me the recording that night with a single message. They're desperate. Elliot moved fast. He sent formal letters to every adult family member who'd attended Mom's meeting. The letters were polite but clear. Contributing funds to circumvent trustee authority could be considered aiding a breach of fiduciary duty. Anyone who participated could face legal consequences. The effect was immediate. Aunt Marla forwarded me screenshots from the family group chat. Cousins backing out. Apologies. Suddenly, nobody wanted to be involved. Mom's fundraising plan collapsed overnight. 2 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. You wouldn't hurt your own mother. Back off the sale. I recognized the phrasing. Colin. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to Elliot and blocked the number. That night, I reviewed the security camera footage from my apartment. I'd installed cameras after Dad died, a precaution that felt paranoid at the time but now seemed prescient. Around midnight, a figure appeared on my porch. Colin. He tried the door handle, twisting it slowly. Then he leaned close and whispered something I couldn't quite make out on the audio. I called the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. But I had the footage. I filed a report and got a case number. Another piece of documentation in the growing file. The next morning, Mom posted on social media. A long, emotional plea. My daughter is evicting me from my home. I don't know where I'll go. Please pray for me. The post went viral in our small town. Messages flooded my phone. Strangers cursing me out. People I'd never met calling me heartless. I posted nothing. Elliot released a brief statement instead. Ms. Harris is enforcing the standard conditions of her late father's trust after documented misuse of funds and an attempted unauthorized loan. All actions are lawful and necessary. Angela from the bank sent me a formal declaration about the forged loan application. It was notarized, detailed, and damning. She included copies of the application, the signature comparison, and notes from her conversation with Colin. I forwarded it to Elliot. This should help. His response was immediate. The judge just moved up the hearing. She wants to resolve this before it gets worse. The new hearing date was 2 weeks away. I spent the time organizing every piece of evidence. Invoices. Recordings. Bank statements. Camera footage. I built a timeline, color-coded and annotated, showing every breach of the trust conditions. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dad, about the diner, about the life we'd had before everything fell apart. I pulled out an old photo album. There was a picture of Dad and me at the diner, his arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning. I was 16, and I'd just gotten my first job washing dishes. He'd been so proud. You're learning the value of work, he'd said. That's more important than anything I could teach you. I closed the album and whispered into the dark. I'm trying, Dad. I'm trying to do what you asked. The courtroom was fuller this time. Aunt Marla sat behind me. Colin and Mom sat across the aisle with Patrick, their attorney. Judge Carver entered, and we all stood. Elliot presented our case methodically. He showed the timeline of expenses from the trust. He played the voice recording of Mom planning to bypass my authority. He submitted the porch camera footage of Colin trying my door. He included Angela's declaration about the forged loan application. Patrick tried to counter. Your Honor, this family is grieving. My client made some financial errors, yes, but they were born of confusion, not malice. The exclusionary event was simply a gathering to celebrate family. Ms. Harris is overreacting. Judge Carver held up the invoice. This clearly lists the trust as payer. How is that confusion? A clerical error by the event planner. Elliot stood. The event planner submitted an invoice to the trust account at Mrs. Stone's direction. That's documented in their correspondence, which we've provided. Judge Carver reviewed the documents silently. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, she looked up. I find that the conditions of the trust were breached. Ms. Harris, as trustee, has the authority to list the property. Mrs. Stone, you are ordered to cooperate with showings and to refrain from interference. We'll reconvene if further issues arise. As we left, I received an email on my phone. A real estate agent. All cash buyer interested. Can we schedule a showing tomorrow? I looked at Elliot. He nodded. Let's do it. The showing was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. I arrived early to open windows and let in fresh air. The house smelled like dust and rain. The buyer's agent, a sharp woman named Veronica, arrived with her client, a developer who stayed mostly silent. I walked them through each room, answering questions about the roof, the plumbing, the last updates. Veronica took notes. The developer studied the walls, the layout, the flow of the space. Why are you selling? Veronica asked as we stood in the kitchen. To honor my father's trust and end a family conflict. She nodded, understanding more than I said. Mom refused to leave during the showing. She followed us from room to room, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, sighing loudly. When we reached the living room, she positioned herself in front of the fireplace. This house has been in our family for over 20 years, she said to Veronica. My late husband built our life here. Veronica glanced at me, then back at Mom. Did you authorize charging a family event to the trust account? Mom's face went red. She couldn't answer. The developer spoke for the first time. I've seen enough. Let's talk numbers outside. An hour later, Veronica texted me. Offer incoming. 1.9 million. 30-day escrow. 60-day rent back if needed. I stared at the message. 1.9 million. The exact middle of the appraisals. And a rent back option, which meant Mom could stay through a transition if she cooperated. I called Elliot. The offer's here. Accept it, he said. This is fair, and it ends the fight. I took a breath and typed my response. We'll review and respond by end of day. Elliot and I met at his office that evening. He'd already reviewed the offer. It was clean. No contingencies. All cash. The rent back was optional, contingent on Mom signing a lease and agreeing to move out after 60 days. This is as good as it gets, Elliot said. And honestly, better than I expected. I read through the contract twice. It felt surreal. The house where I grew up, where Dad taught me to cook, where I'd hidden in the attic during thunderstorms, was about to become someone else's. What if I'm making a mistake? I asked. Elliot leaned back. Your father gave you permission to do this. He knew it might come to this. You're not betraying him. You're honoring him. I signed the acceptance. Elliot countersigned as witness. Then he drafted a formal presentation of the offer to Mom, as required by her occupancy rights under the trust. We delivered it in person the next morning. Mom sat at the dining room table, Colin beside her. Elliot laid out the terms. 1.9 million. 60-day rent back if she cooperated. A relocation stipend carved out from the proceeds to help her find a new place. Mom stared at the papers. If you do this, you kill me. No, I said quietly. If I don't do this, you'll destroy everything Dad built. Colin exploded. You'll regret this, Kennedy. I swear you will. Elliot remained calm. Ms. Harris has 30 days to respond. After that, the offer expires. I signed the acceptance right there, in front of them. My hand didn't shake. I felt oddly calm. Mom watched me sign, and something shifted in her expression. Not acceptance, but recognition. She knew it was over. Escrow opened the next week. The buyer's funds were wired into a neutral account. The title company began their search. Everything moved fast, clinical, efficient. During escrow, Angela forwarded me an email. The bank had referred the forged loan application to their fraud investigation department. Elliot submitted it to the court along with our closing packet. Judge Carver issued a supplemental order. Mom was required to reimburse the trust for all reunion expenses. Colin faced a civil referral for the attempted loan fraud. The family group chat went silent. No more posts. No more accusations. Just quiet. The buyer wired the final funds on a Tuesday morning. Escrow closed at 2 p.m. I sat in Elliot's office, signing page after page, until my hand cramped. Then it was done. $1.9 million, minus closing costs, minus the relocation stipend, minus the reimbursements Mom owed. The net amount was deposited into the trust account. I was no longer just the trustee of a house. I was the trustee of a completed estate, ready to be distributed according to Dad's wishes. Elliot handed me the final settlement statement. It's over, Kennedy. You did it. I stared at the numbers, feeling nothing and everything at once. Relief. Grief. Exhaustion. Victory that tasted like ashes. That night, Colin sent one last text from yet another number. You destroyed this family. I didn't block it. I just replied. No. I protected what was left of it. Then I turned off my phone and slept for 12 hours straight. The movers came on a gray Saturday morning. I'd given Mom the full 60 days, but she'd chosen to leave after 40. Maybe staying was too painful. Maybe she just wanted it over with. I arrived to supervise, as the trust required. The moving truck was already half full. Boxes labeled kitchen and bedroom were stacked on the lawn. Mom sat in a folding chair near the porch, staring at the empty driveway where Dad used to park his truck. I didn't approach her at first. I just watched the movers work, checking items off the inventory list. The couch Dad had bought for their 10th anniversary. The dining table where we'd eaten 1,000 meals. The grandfather clock that had belonged to Dad's father. When the movers took a break, I walked over to Mom. She didn't look up. I set a sealed envelope on the arm of her chair. What's this? She asked, her voice flat. A check. To repay the last debts from the diner. Dad had some outstanding vendor bills when he died. I'm settling them from the estate proceeds. There's also paperwork for a scholarship I'm setting up in his name. She opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a check for $8,000 made out to Harris Diner Legacy Fund, along with a brochure for the Frank Harris Memorial Scholarship for culinary students. This is what the house becomes, I said quietly. Not a trophy. Not a weapon. A way to help people, like Dad always did. Mom's hands shook. He'd be ashamed of what you've done. Maybe. But I can live with that. Can you? She didn't answer. The movers returned, and I stepped back. When the last box was loaded and the truck pulled away, I stood alone on the lawn. The house looked hollow, waiting for its next chapter. The new owners would take possession in 2 weeks. They planned to renovate, modernize, and flip it. The house wouldn't be ours anymore. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some things weren't meant to be preserved exactly as they were. I locked the door for the last time and left the keys in the lockbox for the title company. Mom's restitution came through the following week. The court had ordered her to repay $14,000 for the reunion expenses. She'd set up a payment plan, $1,000 a month for 14 months. Colin's referral to the district attorney was still pending. I didn't know if they'd prosecute, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. The family group chat had been deleted. No more accusations. No more drama. Just silence and distance. Aunt Marla called me one evening. How are you holding up? I don't know yet, I admitted. Some days I feel like I did the right thing. Other days I wonder if I should have tried harder to make peace. You tried for years, Marla said. They're the ones who walked away. You just stopped chasing. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Had I been chasing? Maybe. Trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided I didn't fit their narrative. The scholarship paperwork was finalized that same week. The Frank Harris Memorial Scholarship would award $5,000 annually to a culinary student from our county. The first recipient would be chosen next spring. I'd funded it with $50,000 from the estate proceeds, enough to sustain it for years. I drove by the diner one afternoon. It had been sold and renovated into a coffee shop. The new owners had kept some of Dad's old signage, a nod to the history. I sat in my car across the street and remembered him standing at the grill, spatula in hand, joking with regulars. I hope I made you proud, Dad, I whispered. A text came through. Cousin Ben. Heard about the scholarship. Your dad would love that. I smiled. Thanks. Want to grab coffee sometime? Absolutely. Maybe I couldn't choose my mother or my brother. But I could choose who I let into my life going forward. 3 weeks after the house sold, I hosted a small dinner in my new apartment. It was modest, 2 bedrooms in a quiet complex, nothing like the house I'd grown up in. But it was mine. Fully mine. No trust conditions. No family drama. Just peace. Aunt Marla came, along with Cousin Ben and his partner. I'd also invited 2 friends from work who'd listened to me vent for months without judgment. We crowded around my small dining table, passing plates of pasta and bread, and toasted with tap water because I'd forgotten to buy wine. To new beginnings, Marla said, raising her glass. To choosing your family, Ben added. I looked around the table at these people who'd shown up, who'd stood by me, who'd believed me when it would have been easier to stay neutral. This was my family now. Not the one I was born into, but the one I'd built. After dinner, I found a letter in my mail that I'd overlooked earlier. It was addressed in Dad's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. My heart stopped. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, dated 2 weeks before he died. Kennedy, if you're reading this, it means you've had to make a hard choice. Maybe you sold the house. Maybe you walked away from people who hurt you. Whatever you did, know this, I'm proud of you. Love isn't about keeping people who drain you. It's about protecting what matters. Sell if you must. Walk away if you need to. Love is the only thing you keep. Dad. Tears blurred my vision. I read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it in a frame. I hung it above my stove, next to a small plaque from the diner that read Harris Family Diner, EST 1998. My phone buzzed. The family group chat had been recreated. But this time, it was just Marla, Ben, and a few cousins who'd reached out privately to apologize. The first message was from Ben. Dinner next month at my place? I typed back immediately. I'll bring dessert. Marla sent a heart emoji. Someone else sent a thumbs up. I looked around my small apartment. At the mismatched furniture. At the empty walls waiting for photos. At the future I was building, one choice at a time. Then I opened a new text thread and typed a message to Ben. Doors always open if you need anything. His response came instantly. Same to you. I set my phone down and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Lightness. The weight of the house, the trust, the family expectations, all of it had lifted. What remained was simple and true. I'd protected Dad's legacy. I'd honored his wishes. And I'd learned the hardest lesson of all, sometimes love means letting go. The evening light streamed through my window, golden and warm. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on my second-hand couch. For the first time in years, I felt at home. Not because of where I was, but because of who I'd become. The girl who used to chase approval was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth, who chose her battles, and who understood that family wasn't about blood or houses or reunions. It was about who showed up when everything fell apart. And I'd found my people. I deleted the old family group chat from my phone permanently. Not out of anger, but out of acceptance. That chapter was closed. A new one was beginning. And this time, I was writing it myself. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What does family mean to you? Please share below and subscribe to this channel for more stories like mine.